Hello and welcome back to the Masters of Cinema Marathon. It has been a while. It has been a hot minute since the previous Masters of Cinema Marathon video. For the uninitiated, because I think the last episode was over a year ago, and this did start, I think, in 2016. We're only on 7 videos, or 8 videos, actually. No, 9 videos, in fact. There were 2.5 versions of... Anyway, so... there hasn't been a great output for this series. I started in 2016 with the goal of watching the first 100 spines of the Masters of Cinema Blu-ray collection and making a video about them. Started off with very highly edited videos with pictures and factoids and everything. I was really happy with everything, but it just became too much. And I ended up kind of leaving it behind. And then I think a year or two ago, I came back to it with the idea of, okay, let's just sit in front of a camera, talk about the film, no extra editing to kind of make it daunting for me to put together or to sit down and film the video for, and just have it be a one-take video, very simple, and talk about the movie. Just watch the movie and talk about the movie. It's as simple as that. So I've been kind of doing that, although it's been, I think, about at least, again, a year since the last one. And I was just, I was in work yesterday, I think it was yesterday. Yeah, yesterday I was in work and I was thinking, I'd love to get back to the Masters of Cinema collection. And I have over 150 of these Blu-rays. I think I've watched just over 50 of them. So there's a lot I haven't seen. And, often I kind of get that kind of, not anxiety, but something close to anxiety of thinking, man, I spent all this money. Although a lot of the Masters of Cinema Blu-rays I have in my collection have been very graciously gifts from Christmas and birthday from my family. But, I have all of these films and I haven't watched them. And I feel a little bit guilty is probably the better word than kind of anxious about it. But then, and I've been watching more, I've been watching a lot of Japanese films and, Asian films over the past year or so, and then a lot more, recent films on Netflix and in the cinema, so I kind of neglect certain parts of my collection, but I always kind of defend it by saying, well, at some point I'm probably going to want to watch this, and at some point, it'll be there for me. And my collection was there for me yesterday when I was like, I'd like to get back to the Master Cinema. What's next? And I looked it up. I was like, it's not great. Let's watch that. I just put it on. It doesn't even need to be something I'm like, oh, I really want to see that. It's just like, I want to see something different. I'm aching to get back to different and interesting kinds of films, even if I don't enjoy them. And so to just pick this up off the shelf when I needed it and to pop it in and watch it and be like, yeah, this is something different. Fucking brilliant. So, I feel completely vindicated in my collection, even though I own hundreds of movies I've never seen. They're there for me when I need them. And this was there for me when I needed it. Not that I needed it in some kind of emotional way, but just kind of like, I feel like this. I have it, something completely different. And the film is Soul Power from 2008. And this is spine number 7 in the Masters of Cinema collection. I'm not sure when this Blu-ray was released. I think it had 2 releases. The initial... first print and then the re-release that had the clear case, and I believe I'm not sure if it was a dual format re-release, but either way, a few of those first releases in the collection were in blue cases and then they reprinted them in clear cases. And I've looked online, this is going for like £60+ on Amazon now, so I would like to say in these videos, hey, you can pick this up right now, but I think this is out of print, unfortunately. So another reason I'm glad that I bought it when I did. So this is a film that is made from archival footage that was filmed in 1974 in Zaire in Africa for the, I'm not sure even what they called the festival itself, but it was a 3-day music concert festival that was meant to be the prelude to the Rumble in the Jungle, the Muhammad Ali classic boxing match, which was already covered in a previous documentary called When We Were Kings, which I have actually seen. And so I was kind of interested to see this movie, which is the kind of companion piece to it. And actually in the booklet of this, which is kind of good, there's an interview of the director of this film who was actually served as the editor on When We Were Kings. So there's a link there that makes a lot of sense. I wasn't sure whether this was a guy who just went, hey, I want to make like another documentary out of all that footage. But no, he was very intimately involved in terms of the editing, being the editor of When We Were Kings, which in of itself was very much a kind of what would you call it, a retrospective documentary, because I think that came out in 1994, 1995. So, that film itself, which focused on the Rumble in the Jungle, that was made 20 years after the fact. This was made 30 plus years after the fact. But there was the concert and there was the boxing match. And When We Were Kings focuses on the boxing match because there's too much to cover in one movie. And this serves as kind of the follow-up, but also the companion piece that focuses more on the music concert itself, which took place in Zaire in Africa in 1974 and was going to be, leading into the Rumble in the Jungle. But there was actually some incident where the boxing match couldn't take place. So it was postponed for, I think, 6 weeks, and then it took place. But regardless, this movie, Soul Power, basically focuses on that concert and serves as both, in a way, it's not a documentary, it's a concert film. And in a way, it's not a concert film, it's a documentary. It's kind of a little bit of both, and it toes that line in a very interesting way. As I always like to do, I checked Letterboxd after watching this to see what the general reaction to it was by people. And it seems like this got kind of a decent response from people who have seen it. It gets a little bit buried. I think the reason it's getting a bit more views recently, I say views like it's a YouTube video, but it's getting more attention, is because it was recently included as a special feature on the When We Were Kings Criterion Blu-ray release that came out, I think, at the end of 2019, perhaps maybe the beginning of 2020. I'm not too sure, but it came out fairly recently, and it was included as a special feature. I think is a perfect idea. It's very much a companion piece, a sister film to When We Were Kings, which I need to revisit, actually. When We Were Kings is a movie that I saw in 2009. I can tell you that exactly because it was when I had the great VHS summer of 2009, where I went through all of the charity shops in my local hometown and in Cardiff, and I just rinsed them for VHS tapes. I bought hundreds of videos, and not just films. I discovered the Godfather trilogy for the first time, but also documentaries, and When We Were Kings was one of them, and I just thought, Muhammad Ali, let's check it out. Loved the film. I don't remember too much about it. I remember there's little snippets of the music festival, but it is primarily focused on the Rumble in the Jungle. And there's a lot of great moments in that film, When We Were Kings. I think it's a really, really interesting documentary that captures such an interesting snapshot of boxing history, but also I think, American history, African-American history. And, Muhammad Ali was such a charismatic figure that he really carried that documentary and that film, because it's, again, I'm going off memory because I don't remember too much about it. It's been over 10 years since I saw it, but like his kind of bravado really carries proceedings, I think, throughout the entirety of that feud and that boxing match. But I'd love to see that again. I might even pick up the Criterion at some point, because after seeing this, I really want to watch When We Were Kings again. But my main memory of that film is this shot of him on this road, I guess in Zaire, where it's like it's either just the sun's just setting or it's just rising. The lighting is beautiful, and he's kind of shuffling around on the road. He's delivering one of his promos about the fight and stuff, and it's just such a great moment. Now, what Soul Power does is it utilizes footage of Muhammad Ali, but it doesn't build the movie around them. And there's lots of stuff they could have used that would have been fitting to the time period and the event that took place, but they didn't. And I like that. I like that there, at least from memory, there isn't that much overlap with When We Were Kings. So it does feel like a true, I think, follow-up and sister movie to the When We Were Kings. So what Soul Power does, did I even get to the part? I didn't get to the part. So I was talking about Letterboxd and how people on there were kind of discovering it through the Criterion Blu-ray. A lot of the kind of criticisms come in the form of, well, it needs to be a concert film. There's like half an hour at the beginning where there's no music, where it's just the organizing of the concert, the logistics of setting up the stage, the kind of getting talent, on the plane, and when are they going to arrive, and when are we going to pick them up, and all this stuff, and that it should get to the music faster, and there should be more of the music. I agree that there should be more of the music, but I think that the first 30 minutes of this film, it's an hour and a half, like 93 minutes. The first 30 minutes are fascinating to me, and again, I don't know what it is, but the way this film looks to me is a huge part of the appeal. The film stock, it's very kind of grainy and gritty and suitably 70s, and this film looks gorgeous. There's just I don't know, the contrast of the image, and the grain is just popping off the screen. And I could see some people watching this and saying that it looks too grainy, but I mean, that's film, you know. It's almost like a tangible kind of grain, and it feels so suited to the story that this film is telling. And the first 30 minutes, I just loved all that, like the little, and the editing in the film is superb, because yeah, you're getting all this stuff that may be boring where they're kind of setting up the stage and stuff, but to me it's always interesting, and it's always timely and snappy. You're coming back to New York and seeing the organizers of the concert kind of on the phone talking about the delay from the boxing match, and then you go back to Zaire and there's a guy on a walkie-talkie trying to figure out this, and there's like the British investor, kind of the suit, who's come in, he's like, well, we need to have this done by then, and I'm not happy about this, and we need $8,000 to get these cables over here, and we need to speak to the president of Zaire and all this stuff, and they're like, well, we need to do that first, and I'm not happy about this and whatever. And then you've got people on the plane coming over. The scene on the plane is the scene, but it's weird to call it a scene because it's life, but you know, as far as it being a film, the scene on the plane, you know, you got James Brown on there, you got all of the kind of talent and everything, these amazing musicians, and they're having a party. They've been on this plane for 15 hours, and they're singing. They got the instruments going. You can tell some of them are high as fuck. You know, one of the guys who actually he was one of the organizers of the concert. He he is so high on the plane, and they land, and he speaks with one of the other organizers, and he's just like, his eyes are just like, and he's just like, yeah, some stuff went like, it's just, there's no hiding how stoned he is, and it's kind of hilarious. But there's just this vibe to it, you know. There's this life and vitality to Soul Power that comes through, you know, those moments. The urgency of them trying to get everything ready on time, and the logistics of everything, worrying about rain happening, all that kind of stuff, and then the music itself. And the idea was to bring a lot of the biggest names in African American music, like James Brown, B.B. King, Bill Withers, and many others who I'm not that familiar with, to Africa. You know, it's kind of like going back to their roots, you know, that they may have not even gone back to before. And there's definitely a huge theme to the film, the documentary, but also just the event itself in going back to roots and kind of, you know, Black America, but also, you know, Black Africa, and how Muhammad Ali, he goes there and he talks. This is a very interesting moment where he talks in the film about how coming to Zaire, he is kind of struck by how peaceful it is. Now, I don't know if this is just because of the areas that he went to, but he talks about how America is the real jungle. America is the real dangerous place. You know, he says that people talk about Africa and Zaire and similar places like, you know, oh, they're scared to go there. And he's like, America's the place you should be scared of. You know, that's the place where all these horrible things keep happening day after day. You come here, it's peaceful, it's nice, you know, people. So there are ideas there that are very much verbalized by Muhammad Ali as he's talking. There's another interesting scene when he's sitting down and he's kind of having food with people after they've landed. And I don't know if some of the timeline of this has been conveniently edited to form kind of a flowing narrative, but the way it makes out, you know, they land in Zaire, and Muhammad Ali, he's having food with people, and everyone's crowding around. It's really interesting because you have these shots of people just there, just taking pictures of him. And it's like this guy couldn't just sit down and eat without having a swarm around him, but he's kind of dealing with it in such great stride. And there's a guy there who's getting really kind of verbal with Ali, and he's really saying like, you know, I'm free, you know, my whole life I'm free. And Muhammad Ali's like, you think you're really free? And he talks about freedom, and he talks about a very interesting topic, which is how Black people were treated in America at the time. And he goes in this big spiel about how, you know, still, I mean, I guess, I don't know what happened to trigger this, but Ali gets kind of defensive, and he's like, no, we're not brothers. We're not brothers. You know, Black men and white men, we're not brothers. And he's like, you know, that still Black men out in America will get pulled over by the police, and they'll find an excuse to either kill or, you know, arrest them. And he goes in this whole spiel about it. And I'm just thinking, holy fuck, I mean, this is still a problem. And it's kind of horrifying when you think about it like that you can look back to the 70s and see how a lot of things that went on in the world, it was like the Wild West in comparison to how things are now. That just, you know, it is a crazier time. But there are still some things that haven't fully changed. I mean, you still see videos now on social media where it's the same thing. I saw one recently of a guy who apparently had tinted windows in his car. And the police pulled him over and they said, you know, you've got tinted windows, you need to get that fixed. He's like, yeah, I've already been pulled over for it and been told about this, I'm going to get it changed. And they're like, we need to see, you know, your details and everything. And he's like, well, you know, I've already been spoken to about this. And within a minute, the woman has taken her gun out and has pointed at his head and says, "You need to stop resisting arrest." The video is there. You can see it. And it is unbelievable how quickly that escalated. And you just don't see that with white men, white women. It's yeah. And obviously, it goes without saying this was a black man in America. And you just see these things, and it's crazy how that stuff is still surviving. Anyway, it just made me think of that when Ali had that little spiel about it. I just thought, holy shit, that's still relevant, and that's fucked up, you know. But yeah, so there's a lot of that, and going back to roots, and even in Zaire, I guess the French had some kind of involvement in that area. I don't know anything about the politics of the area, the history of the area in general in Africa, but it seems the French occupied at some point because they speak a lot of French in that area. And there's a scene with Ali and this young girl, and I guess she spoke French, and so they couldn't really communicate with each other. And he's saying, she had her language stolen, I had my language stolen, and maybe one day we'll be able to speak to each other in our own language. So I enjoyed that. It wasn't overbearing on the documentary, but it was absolutely a part of it. And the culture of Africa is celebrated in such a huge way in this, not only through the entire, well, not the entire, there's a few white members of some of the bands, but for the majority, that the front men and women of these performances are all black. And so there's a celebration of that from the African American side, but also the African side. And there's even black people singing in Spanish. There's native kind of African language. I mean, the subtitles would just say "sings in native language." I don't forget the term used, but it wouldn't even identify the actual language. Which to me, I thought I would have liked to have seen what language it was in. There's one woman who is speaking in French, and then she starts speaking in her native tongue, which has all these clicking and kind of weird sounds from the mouth and stuff. And that was a really interesting performance. Not musically to me all that interesting, but just from a cultural perspective, it was really cool. And some of it didn't resonate with me, some of it did. The song from Bill Withers was really incredible. I showed it to Connie, and Connie's very musical, and she just didn't like it at all. She thought he was holding the notes for way too long, but I thought it was really something. B.B. King, fucking love B.B. King. It was so cool to see one of his performances from 1974 in this amazing film quality in high definition. I just love B.B. King so much. I wish there was more of him. And then, of course, we have James Brown, who was kind of built up to be the kind of main event. I don't know if everyone played on each of the 3 days, but it very much kind of has day 1, day 2, day 3, and it doles out to you a performance from kind of each of the main bands from the festival. So again, you have about 30 minutes of build up to the show happening, and then you have the music. And when we very much follow day 1 starts, we get some stuff. There's backstage stuff, which is really interesting. BB King coming back and kind of being like, yeah, that was pretty good. And some of it was good. You see like these titans of music go out and deliver these incredible performances, and they're not too happy with it, or they could see some cracks in their game, and that's kind of really interesting and fun. James Brown is he gets 2 songs at the end, and he's kind of built up to be the main event of the entire film and the entire festival, as he probably should be. He was such a huge star at the time. Not my kind of music. He's got a great voice and everything, but just the kind of and then just the screeching and everything. But he has such a dynamic and like lively on stage. I'll leave them for free. On stage presence, and charisma. The way he's just spinning around and doing these kind of weird splits, and like the microphone's bouncing off his shoulder. He's popping up again. He's getting back on the microphone. Really, really entertaining stuff. But they really only pick one song from each kind of the featured performers. So some of them who I didn't know, the Spinners, Miriam Makeba, I believe she was the one who did the kind of the clicking kind of song, and she even kind of jokes that people call it the click song or the clicking song because they can't pronounce what the title of the song is, which is kind of funny. Bill Withers, Don King is kind of in the film as whenever Don King is on screen, he is like he just seems to be never to be off. He's always in that kind of promoter kind of just like what's the term? There's definitely a term. Just the words are rattling out of his mouth. He's just like it's like a piston. He's just got all these things that he's got to say about this and about that and about this and about that. It's just like a constant stream of consciousness coming out of his mouth. You can see why he was a successful promoter. Manu Dibango, Big Black, Taboo Lay, The Crusaders, Celia Cruz, and the Fania All Stars. I mean, there's loads of people who I'm not familiar with in the slightest. But they get kind of featured in this. I'm sure there's probably other performers who weren't featured in the actual film itself. I mean, the film itself, it's 90 minutes, and apparently the full concert is 12 hours. And the director, whose name is, if I can find it on the back here, because I definitely don't remember it off the top of my head. Let's see, it must say on the special features. Yes, the director, Jeffrey Levy Hint. He says on the interview with the director, special feature on the disc, that it's his pipe dream to release the entire concert at some point. And this was 10 years ago, and it hasn't happened. And it's a real shame, because I would love to see kind of more of it. More of B.B. King, more of Bill Withers, more of James Brown, more of the other things, I'm certainly not as passionate about it to be like, I want to see the full concert, but I would like to see more of it. And maybe that's a part where the film fails. Maybe that's where the film succeeds. It's a film you can put on for 90 minutes and get such a vibrant snapshot of Zaire in 1974, of the African American music industry in 1974. And as I said, you have the 3 days, like backstage segments, and then we'll end and we'll start day 2 with footage from earlier that day. And I think I don't know who the band is, but they're playing this music, and one of the guys is playing bongos. And then we follow to the next day in the morning or the afternoon, and that band is out in the streets with just the people of Zaire, and they're just playing music in the streets with them, playing like new instruments that like the African people are showing them like how to use and stuff, and like playing around and just kind of dancing and singing. It's just so full of life, and it's just so positive and nice. I don't know. And there's a little bit of footage of the people of Zaire, and we kind of juxtapose that at the very beginning of like these women going out and kind of harvesting crops and stuff, and that's intercut with like the white crew building the stage. So we kind of get the culture clash element going on there. So you get a little bit of Zaire, not loads, but you just get little segments of each part of everything that was going on during that time period of setting up this big monumental concert, and a little bit of Muhammad Ali, and kind of a little bit of the promotion of the fight. I don't think the fight is even, it is mentioned, of course, because they talk about the fight being postponed, but he kind of pops up almost for cameos, Ali, throughout the film, but they're really memorable ones. And again, the editing is so good. There's a sequence where he's talking about the plane, and he's making this he's making like this jet sound, and then it kind of like fades into the plane itself. So there's a kind of some fun edits, but also the way a song will end and we'll cut to like backstage or the next day. The editing is so great. It really just is punchy. It's almost to a beat, where a point where it really flows. The film flows magnificently, and as I said, I'd love to see more of it. But I think the fact that I'm left wanting more makes it maybe a stronger film, because this is something you can throw on and watch in an hour and a half. It isn't like a 3.5 hour long. You have to set aside a whole afternoon to watch a concert film. It's a little bit of a documentary. It's a little bit of a snapshot of Zaire in 1974, a snapshot of the African-American music industry at that time, like I said, and of this concert itself. And I think that, for that, it really succeeds. And so there's a few things here and there. Some of the performances don't hold my attention anywhere near as much. So, to me, those are weak points, but I think they need to be there, because it's just representative of the whole thing. You can't just be like, well, that wasn't very good, or that wasn't as good as this. It needs to be a representation of everything. And I don't know how much was left out, how much could have gone in, but, I thought that it was a really good time. I loved this film. There's just something about it. There's a vibrancy to it that is really positive. And I love the hell out of this film. Really, really great. So I have committed myself or decommitted myself, I suppose you could say, from not, when I started this massive cinema marathon, I wanted to do it where it was like, right, I'm going to watch every film, I'm going to watch every special feature, read everything in the booklets. And I think with number 4, A Married Woman, Une Femme Marie, by Jean-Luc Godard, the booklet is like thick as hell, and I just couldn't read it. It was just such like mumbo jumbo to me. So I've fallen at that hurdle and decided I'm not going to go through every special feature. But for this, I wanted to. So it's not a packed disc, but it has quite a few things. So He has an exclusive video interview with the director, Jeffrey Levy Hint, and he talks about 6 minutes about the film. It's actually really succinct. You know, you'd think, oh, it's not very in-depth, but he really basically answers all the questions I'd have about how he was involved in the film, how it came about, and everything like that. So really interesting, to the point, 6 minutes. Then we have 30 minutes of deleted behind-the-scenes footage. So we get about, I think, 15-20 minutes of deleted scenes from the documentary, and then we get about 15-20 minutes of extra performances. And the big disappointment of this disc is that those features are all in standard definition. Not only are they, you know, kind of, I don't know what the correct term is, pillar box, letterbox, but they're basically crammed down so that the deleted scenes and the extra performances are like that on the screen. Let me try and get an approximation. So they're probably like that big on the screen. So you've got black bars on the left and right, on the top and the bottom, small screen. The frame rate is off. It's not the frame rate of film, 24 frames. I think they might have put it up to 30 frames per second. It's slightly off. It doesn't look right. Obviously, at standard def, you don't really see any of the grain. The quality isn't there, and it's just really disappointing. It doesn't look like dog shit, but it doesn't look great either. And that was really super disappointing. I don't know if it was like a budgetary thing or what, you know. I mean, this film came out 2008. I mean, Blu-ray was in its infancy at that point, so I'm not sure what the decision there was. I'm not sure if like the whole documentary was like locked off and processed in film. I don't know these technical terms, but God, I would have loved to have seen those behind the scenes stuff in full HD and the glory. I mean, the film looks so great. I would have loved the behind the scenes to look, or it's not even behind the scenes, just deleted scenes and stuff they didn't use. And a lot of it, really, I can see why they didn't include it. It wasn't as interesting. And the musical performances, none of them were really like, wow, that should have been in there. You know, but it was like, hey, it's cool to see. So I enjoyed it, but the quality of it could have been better. It was what it was. And then we also had the original UK theatrical trailer, which is in high definition, and it's a really nicely edited 2-minute trailer. Nothing more to say there. I like kind of looking at trailers and seeing how they're edited, but they did a good job of selling it, I thought. And then we have a 36-page full color booklet featuring archival publicity stills, a director's statement, and a compilation of let me try that again. I'll leave that one in for free too. A compilation of reminiscences by the Zaire 74 participants. Okay, so the festival was called Zaire 74. There we go. That mystery is solved. So yeah, so the compilation of reminiscences was really good. It's like people who were involved kind of remembering and talking about it either at the time or many years later. And they're really nice snapshot bullet point kind of quotes that I found really interesting. And the director's statement was great. That's where he talks about how he was an editor on When We Were Kings and how it came about. And he even talks about how they made a version of the film that was like 3.5 hours long, and they've like, we got to cut this down. They shaved off a lot of time. They showed it to people, and people were like, this is too long, you know. And so he had to really kind of go, how do I kind of reshape this and refigure it? And then he even got criticisms in the kind of preview screenings of people saying that stuff at the beginning when they're setting up the concert is not good. Like, you know, that would just get to the music. So that was an instance where he had criticism, but he decided to not ignore it, but say, this is the film I want to make. This stuff is just as fascinating to me as the music. And I think he made the right call there, at least for me, because I love it kind of painting that kind of from start to finish. I would have even loved to have seen like them, you know, taking down the stage and how it was, you know, flying back and how people felt. And if there was kind of the, you know, the post-event blues, you know, that I certainly have when I go on like go travel somewhere and then I come home and say, oh man, you know, I don't know, I thought that there could have been even more to kind of dig into there, but it ends really nicely with the James Brown performance. There's even a post-credits sting from James Brown, which is really, really funny actually. But there's just lots of great moments. It's a really fucking great film. I would highly recommend it, even though it is unfortunately out of print. Now there is a commentary by the director and also one of the men who organized the festival itself, which is only present on the American Blu-ray. And I honestly might double dip at some point, you know, way into the future. I think the Blu-ray in America is only about $9, so it might be more attainable than I think actually. But you know, I would love to hear that commentary track actually. It's one of those ones that I would very much enjoy hearing. But I do think the supplements on this are really, really good. for what they are. And that was Spine number 7, Soul Power. Really, really good stuff. I feel like there's more I could talk about. I was really amped up by the film. As I was watching the film, I was like, I can't wait to talk about this. I know, there's just something really cool about it. And again, I think the vibrancy is a word I keep coming back to. There's just something about it. And I think that the photography is incredible. You know, some of the close-ups of these performers on stage, they're just beautiful. There's one particular close-up of James Brown. You know, he's got sweat pouring down his face. He's so into this, and his head is moving back and forth between the light, and it's kind of creating this halo effect around his head. It's just a stunning shot. You know, the cinematography is fantastic, and the director in the booklet, very much, you know, thanks the cinematographers, the men who filmed this, by saying, you know, the stuff that you filmed was gold, and it was, you know, my privilege to work with it. I'm very loosely paraphrasing, you know. So he gives full credit to like the footage he had to work with. And I also love how it's completely presented without narration. There's a little bit of text at the beginning to kind of set up what, you know, Zaire 74 was, but, you know, it is just showing you in kind of chronological order the stuff that happened as it happened. And again, I mean, this is like 7 spines into the Masters of Cinema collection, and already the second documentary. And I think there's not many, if any, more documentaries in the Masters of Cinema collection. But, you know, with For All Mankind, which I previously talked about, I loved how that film was again presented without narration, without retrospective, without kind of getting people to sit down and talk about it after, which you could have very easily done. You could have gone to, you know, some of the people who were still alive in 2008 who were involved in the Zaire 74 festival and talk about, you know, their feelings on it. You know, the guy who I think there's 3 people who are kind of the organizers. I'm not sure, but again, who's alive in all of those kind of cases. But you could have had people who are involved in the production and putting the thing together, sitting down and talking about it, reflecting on it, and then interspersing the footage. You could have very easily done that. It would have been very, you know, good, I think. But there's something special about just letting the footage speak for itself, because if anything, it speaks for itself, I think. So I love the way that it was laid out like that. And that is all I think I have to say about Soul Power. So thank you for joining me. If you've seen it, let me know your thoughts down below. If you can get it, try and get it. I would highly recommend it. I'm not the biggest music guy. I mean, I love music, but I'm not like a dedicated, devout kind of music lover where I know a lot of this stuff. But B.B. King, I love, but have I really heard much of him? Not really. You know, James Brown, you know, I can be entertained by it to a certain degree, but I don't really know that much about him, or even if I'm that familiar with a lot of his music. It really gets as far as, you know, Sex Machine. But, you know, that doesn't matter. I love different kinds of music, and I do think the cultural stuff that comes into it. I mean, there's like a performance, like a dancing performance, and they've got all these, you know, these outfits and stuff. I just find it interesting. It's just, you're just seeing a different part of the world, which is really, really cool. And there's even a really horrible part in the extra performances section of the extras, where you see another kind of dance troupe kind of doing this on-stage performance. And I love that they did that. That it was not just like, here are these, you know, popular, famous African Americans coming over to our country and performing for us. You know, yeah, they're taking center stage too, but so are we. They got, you know, people from Zaire who to kind of go on stage and do it too. So it's kind of all, it's mixed up and intermingled and kind of, you know, a big cultural celebration. But there's a dance troupe, and this one guy has got 2 fucking arrows going through his cheeks and through his mouth, and there's like blood coming down his face. I'm just like, what the like, it's grim, you know, and I guess that's what they do. But I mean, seeing a guy with 2 arrows forcefully stuck through his cheek, through his face, for this dance thing, I mean, it's like that. I mean, if that ain't commitment, I don't know what is. But anyway, that's certainly something you look at and go, man, it's a completely different culture. It's something I couldn't even understand. But that's what they do, or what they did. And yeah, anyway, so something like that, I'd almost be interested in, like, what's the mindset behind that? What's the backstory to that? And, you know, things like that make you want to go and look up those things. So maybe I'll do that after I've finished filming this video. Why do some Africans stick arrows through their cheeks? Is it some sort of ritual? Is this kind of I don't know, has it gone on for hundreds of years? Like, what's the story behind that? It's really interesting and disgusting at the same time. Anyway, Soul Power. The soundtrack to The Rumble in the Jungle. I love that this is part of the Masters of Cinema collection, I think. And I think that the director did a masterful job of wrangling all this footage and putting it together in a brilliant 90-minute package that, again, as I said, is full of footage that speaks and sings for itself. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
He's alright by me. Apart from the fact he throws cans of Carlin into a tree. Yeah, he's really cool. Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you. 'Cause